Hi, welcome back to Judith Narrative Anglo-Saxon Poem, and this is kind of a long section. I'm going to read a summary that I wrote for the Prezi presentation, and then I'm going to read a two Prezi page length section from my senior thesis paper, and then I'm going to go ahead and read a series of supports that I used in defense of my thesis in the paper, and that's the plan. So, the Anglo-Saxon poem Judith is based on the story found in the Bible, the book of Judith, but the poem is greatly condensed from its Hebrew original. Also, the poem is one piece in a collection of Anglo-Saxon writings, which comprises the Beowulf manuscript. This manuscript is a topic for much scholarly debate over its origin and time. Some scholars, such as Kiernan, argue the manuscript originates in a post-Anglo-Saxon era, and this places the text in a Danish England before the Norman conquest, so 1016 to 1066. And or even later during the early modern era. Although other more recent scholarship is directing the analysis of the manuscript to a late 10th century and or early 11th century time frame. Scholarship in support of this time origin is coming from Hartman, Lucas, and Yerdov, to name but a few. In my senior thesis, I argued the Judith poem is purporting a literary propaganda tone, which is supported by a 10th century and or 11th century composition. And I will add to that that there is a thought out there that all the different texts that are in the Beowulf manuscript weren't necessarily written at the same time. I, however, go with some of these more recent scholars in thinking that it was probably written, the texts were probably compiled in a vision for this specific idea of the Beowulf manuscript and for a specific purpose. We're going to get to that here in a few moments. So, this excerpt from my senior thesis, the introduction, quote, "The Anglo-Saxons are recasting the character Judith to fit their projected values during a crucial time in their history. Moreover, in the presence of older cultures in the island, the Anglo-Saxon are known as the most recent of invaders to take control of the leadership of England. At the time Judith is being composed, the Anglo-Saxon had been endeavoring to achieve and hold dynastic control of England for a few hundred years, yet one of their strongest choices in ruling the nation was to support intermarriage of dynastic claims to the English throne. And so by the 10th century, many of these dynastic ties had become woven into kindred connections, which comprised the Anglo-Saxon leadership. Henceforth, the Anglo-Saxon worldview was engaged with a multicultural criticism. These were leaders focused on a synthesis of ideas and narratives from other tribal cultures, but they filtered the contributions through an Anglo-Saxon lens. Furthermore, these kindred connections were representative of Celtic origins. Thus, the language of the Judith poem is dynamically weaving and witnessing in England, with many cultural identities trying to be united under the banner of Christendom and through the unity of Anglo-Saxon dynastic leadership." Quoted from page 1. Now, continuing this quote on the next Prezi page, quote, "Through this unified idea and value of Christendom, the Anglo-Saxon finds justification for their need to keep the newest invaders, the Viking, as an outsider to England's fertile landscape. Indeed, one can find substantial textual support in the poem in alignment with historical context to read Judith as a multicultural propaganda effort. It's an effort connecting the idea explored by many current scholars, which is placing the Beowulf manuscript as a production of the late 10th and early 11th centuries. Also, the poem represents multicultural female leadership ideologies and synthesizes them into a hegemony of Anglo-Saxon sanctioned war propaganda. Judith as a propaganda text is in keeping with their highest female ideal of the shield maiden rousing her nation to battle. Thus, the character Judith is functioning as an archetypical Anglo-Saxon shield maiden, and Aethelflaed is their premier historical example. Aethelflaed was a leader who did confront the Viking invasions. Moreover, like the poem's Judith, Aethelflaed enacted a warrior agency on behalf of her nation. Also, both the character in the poem and the historical person, Aethelflaed, demonstrate traits emblematic of the Christian model of womanhood present in the image of the Blessed Virgin Mary as she confronts the spiritual and temporal forces of evil. Henceforth, the multicultural criticism of Judith is witnessed in the text using a female leadership lexicon sensitive to a Christian, Anglo-Saxon, and other more ancient ideals about female leadership agency, as well as through the climactic scene's incorporation of Trinitarian prayer by the Celtic lorica format alongside the hypermetricity of Anglo-Saxon poetic structure. Okay, gonna stop there.